The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar titled Navigating Federal Regulation, How Policies Impact Regional Businesses. I am Brian Reel, Marketing and Event Coordinator at REMI, and our speaker today is Jeffrey Dykes, an analyst at REMI. Jeff has been working at REMI for 8 years, and in this time he has contributed to many consulting projects and has provided extensive technical support to our clients. If you have a question during this presentation, I encourage you to put your question into the question box at any time, and time permitting, I will moderate these questions with Jeff after the presentation. So you don't need to wait to put in your question, you can just put it in and then we'll come back to it at the end. Shortly after this webinar, I will send all attendees a link containing a recording and the slides from this webinar for your reference. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today, and take it away, Jeff.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the impact of federal regulations on the economy and how that affects businesses and consumers and the overall economy. So we'll be looking at a couple scenarios and then going into the one of our E3 plus models, energy, environment, and economy, looking at how different regulations can impact the economy. So go to the next slide. Just a background on REMI. We're the leader in dynamic local, state, and national policy modeling. Our goal is to improve public policy through economic modeling software that informs public policy and decision making. We're founded in 1980 on the idea that government decision makers and policymakers should test the impacts of their policies before actually implementing them. So that's what we do through our software. Try to provide a platform to test out those ideas. Some of our clients include they're mostly state and local government agencies, planning organizations, universities, consulting firms. So a couple examples here: UConn, Sandia National Laboratories, University of Michigan. All looking at the impact of public policy. So just to the background on the scenario that we're talking about today. So there have been different types of regulations that have come up in terms of environmental, looking at improving in the environmental conditions. One example is the Clean Air Act of 1963. So this establishes air quality standards for pollutants like nitrogen oxide, sulfur dioxide, particulate matter, and other volatile organic compounds. So once that was implemented, the air quality started to clear up. Clean Water Act of 1972, that was passed to release discharge of pollutants into the nation's surface waters, including lakes, rivers, and streams, as well as wetlands and other aquatic ecosystems. Limiting the pollution and from factories into various rivers and other ecosystems. The Endangered Species Act of 1973 protected threatened and endangered species and their habitats. And then how these regulations can impact businesses. So some of them can, well, in some aspects, these regulations will increase costs for businesses, but then we'll also be looking at the benefits because they allow for cleaner water, cleaner air. So part of what we do is providing a way to quantify those benefits. But for now, we'll be looking at the costs and quantifying those. So EPA regulations on emissions and water quality can impact industries like manufacturing, energy, transportation. When there's a regulation, there's usually it has to do with maybe a factory needing to come in compliance with like the one pictured. If they're releasing pollutants, they have to invest a certain amount to ensure that pollutant doesn't get out. So that increased costs for whatever the facility is. And then sometimes those are passed down to consumers. So you might see an increase in production costs for a company that, or for an industry that's affected. And then you would have, there might be whatever they sell, whether it's a energy company selling electricity, maybe they're passing down the rates on the consumers. So consumers might be affected too by higher electricity prices. So it depends on elasticities and other factors. Let's see, so regional impacts as businesses choose to shift their operations to other regions with less regulations. So there could be there can be situations where regulations in one state cause businesses to move, either comply with those regulations or move to a different state. So that's another potential impact of regulations on businesses. So the impact on people. So this is where we started to talk about more of the benefits. Improved air and water quality. So after the Clean Air Act and Water Act, there's less pollution in the air, so less smog and less polluted rivers. So people get to enjoy the benefits of that, living in an environment that's cleaner, safer products. So if there's certain chemicals that are produced that are considered unsafe and then they're banned or restricted, then people end up being safer in the long term. Energy efficiency. So when switching over to a more efficient, a more less carbon intensive source of fuel, that sometimes increase the costs for that energy producer, but it might investing in energy efficiency might decrease the costs for in terms of how much fuel goes into energy production. Increased costs. EPA regulations can increase costs for businesses, which may be passed on to consumers. And then the regulations may lead to a reduction in options. So you might not have the ability to use certain types of fuels anymore because of regulations, but it'll improve the air quality. So there's different costs and benefits to weigh. And this is a graph showing the CO2 emissions from all sectors. So just showing in 1982, looks like it's at a low, and then through 2007, it had been increasing. to millions of metric tons of CO2. And then since that has more, might have to do with partly have to do with the recession in 2008, 2009, where there's less demand for energy. But then after that, there's more regulations come in place. It's decreasing the CO2 emissions overall. And then transportation sector, this is looking at CO2 specifically on those transportation sectors. So it's again with that previous graph, peaks at 2007. Sharp decline during the recession, and then yeah, pretty constant from 2010 to 2020, but then drops again. Just some background there. Energy sector, so historically 2,000 to 2,500 million metric tons, peak in 2007, and then it's fallen significantly over the past decade. So E3 plus, so we're going to talk a little bit about E3 plus model, which is the economic model that we have that's focused on energy. So it's called energy, environment, and the economy. So it's the premier solution for looking at the economic demographic impacts for the energy and environmental sectors. So it's designed to be able to look at these costs and benefits in terms of impacts on the economy and in regards to energy. So we can look at things like changing electric rates, different power sources, switching from, if you want to look at the impact of switching from coal to natural gas. That's one of the things that we can look at. Investing in production of energy and just various policy changes. This graph or figure that you see here, these are the model linkages. So this has to do with it's kind of a summary of how the model works, looking at various economic and demographic concepts, how they interact with each other. So you have the 5-block diagram is what it's known as. So you have the output and demand, labor and capital demand, population and labor supply, compensation, prices and costs, and market shares. So those are the 5 basic sections of the economy that, and then these arrows show how they interact. Each of the components within those interact with each other. So if we affect things like production costs, that'll affect market shares, and then that'll have indirect effects on things like consumption, disposable income. Slide. So the model that we'll be looking at today is it's a 10 region, 160 sector E3 plus. It's the regions include different groups in kind of aggregations of regions and of counties in New York, Massachusetts, and I think Rhode Island. The scenario is, so we're looking at a couple of different things. Increasing production costs for the oil and gas extraction industry. So that kind of goes off of if we were to look at a regulation and the impact if the oil and gas extraction has to become compliant with that. So maybe it could be something like just imposing a certain cost that makes prohibits them from using a certain chemical in the production of oil, natural gas. So it could be anything, any type of regulation that's making it maybe more just cleaner in general. Another one is increasing consumer price for motor vehicle fuels, electricity, and natural gas. So that's something where maybe some of those costs are passed on to consumers. These things are slightly more expensive because of the regulations. And then we'll look at the benefits too. That has to do with amenity, which is a variable that we have to look at the quality of life aspects. So to quantify what increased quality of life means for the economy. So if there's an area with they have maybe more costs, but they also have better air quality, we can look at amenity to show what exactly that means, how that benefit comes in. And then the years, so we're looking at regulation as if it's implemented in 2024 to 2040. Let me go back. I'm going to share my other screen now. We'll look at the model and then see how the simulation works. 1 second, just going to share my other screen. Okay. You should be able to see the other screen now. So this is the home screen of E3 Plus. So you have new simulation here. You can look at the baseline, a couple other tools and settings here. We're gonna go into to create a new simulation, and I have this pre-prepared. So here are the 3 aspects that we were talking about a minute ago. So one is the increase in production costs for oil and gas extraction. This is as if costs for this industry are increasing. Just picking a random number, 20 million. So if costs are going to go up 20 million from the baseline each year, so we're inputting it spread among all of the regions within Massachusetts, New York, and Rhode Island that are in this model. The other one is a $20 million increase in consumer price for motor vehicle fuels, fuel oil, and other fuels, electricity, and natural gas. So basically some sort of energy regulation that increase the cost, but the goal is to make it maybe more like a cleaner or safer energy production. And then the amenity. So this is a little harder to quantify, but just using this as an example, this is capturing the quality of life measures. So if and there are all sorts of ways of quantifying this. It could be having to do with fewer hospital visits because of fewer instances of getting asthma, or reduced mortality. So there are all sorts of ways of measuring, quantifying this value. But this, just for an example, these numbers don't correspond to any specific study. but they're just used to show how the model can be used. Yeah, so we'll run this simulation. I'm going to run it out to 2040. And then this shows the results. So on average, 2,000 to 3,000 jobs created, mostly from that amenity benefit. There's increase in population. So even with those increased costs, the amount of amenity input is more than outweighs what those costs would be. GDP. So you can view personal income, and then we can look at other changes. So with E3 Plus, we can look at things like changes in emissions and energy consumption. So first we'll look at energy, carbon dioxide emissions. So this is showing that we're let's see, decreasing. So since we affected, we didn't look at the petroleum, or we did affect the consumption of oil, but we also looked at a direct change in natural gas. So because one of the inputs was natural gas. Let's see. Yeah, motor vehicle fuels. Just scroll down here. Electricity, natural gas. So you'll see natural gas is one of those things that's decreasing overall. Residential. So here's the residential sector, commercial, industrial, transportation. So for industrial, you'll see natural gas is decreasing significantly for that. For the commercial sectors, there's an overall decrease, at least in the first, looks like for first couple of years until 2029. But there are a couple of different factors at play. There's the increase in cost, but then there's the increase in amenity as well. So that increase in amenity can potentially be bringing people into the region, which then causes more economic activity, which could potentially cause more emissions overall. But the goal would just be to maybe at least change the mix of fuels used. So there's more of a switch from oil and coal to natural gas and electricity. So this is one of the ways that this model can be used, where it can show how which policies can allow for a switch from more carbon intensive fuel sources to ones that are cleaner. So yeah, so carbon dioxide emissions by industry and fuel type in millions of metric tons. We can look at percent change too. The social cost of carbon. So this is another one. Just looking at the costs that if there are regulations in place to decrease the cost of the effect that cleaner air has on the economy. Energy consumption. So this is to be a similar concept to the carbon dioxide carbon dioxide emissions, except this is in billions of BTU. So how much less energy each industry and industry sector, so residential, commercial, industrial, transportation, is using by fuel source. So petroleum, natural gas, coal, and electricity. So based on the changes you see here, you'll probably see a similar profile in terms of if you're switching from coal and petroleum to natural gas, electricity. Like for industrial coal, so the simulation resulted in a net decrease of coal, even though petroleum wasn't increased. And then for transportation, there's no change in the coal because transportation doesn't rely on coal for energy production or energy consumption. But there is a net decrease in natural gas and electricity, even though the total energy usage is increased. And then we go to this the model linkages diagram again. So yeah, so this is what we were looking at earlier in the presentation. So we can see kind of interactive of how each of these components are affected. We can click on production costs. So based off of the simulation, we have a certain change in production costs, mostly the oil and gas extraction industry, because they're the ones that are directly affected. But then other industries also are affected that demand from this industry. So like petroleum, natural gas, electricity. We can also view percent change. So based off of the inputs that we have, oil and gas extractions, cost of production are increasing by about 6%. Petroleum increasing by about 0.04%. Go back to the model linkages. Another one is consumer prices. Since we also affected consumer prices directly, this is something that we can also look at to see how consumers will be affected, what items are more expensive now. So yeah, motor vehicle fuels, fuel oil, and other fuels, and natural gas and electricity. So we affected those directly. So those are understandably the largest changes. We can also look at how prices are being affected by region. Certain regions will experience higher energy price changes than others. So that's one of the benefits of this model showing by region. And then population. So there's an increased migration into the area from the amenity factor. And then I won't go into too much detail on this, but we could also look at detailed GDP components, income profile, like disposable income, employment by industry and occupation, production and trade. So yeah, output, demand, trade flows, look at this. So in 2024, so it's showing that so the trade is how much the trade is affected between from origin to destination. We can view that by industry too. So oil and gas extraction. So the rest of the world. So from, let's say, New York City to the rest of the world, from the rest of the world to New York City, the trade of oil has increased by this amount. So it provides a good picture of showing how trade is affected over time. And then also demographic changes like population by ethnicity, gender, age. Lots of detail there. Yeah, I think at this point we're gonna open up for questions. If anyone has any questions, feel free to type that in, and then Brian will read it off.
Excellent, thank you. Thank you to everybody who attended, and thank you, Jeff, for the great presentation. As mentioned, we're going to get into the questions portion. So if you have any questions about this presentation or about REMI in general, please feel free to drop them in the question box now, and we will add them to the queue. Also, like I mentioned earlier, for anyone that might have been late, or if you want to reference these slides or video later, in about an hour after the presentation is finished, we will send a link containing the recording from the webinar, as well as the slides, to your email, so you can use them for any for your reference later. And we will now get into the first question. So, is there a way to look at the exact model used in these calculations?
So this model, we do have a demo model. We can provide a link to that, but this model is a custom built model. You wouldn't be able to download this specific model, but we do have a demo model just so you'd be able to have all the functionality of that I showed here, just with 3 sample regions. So because the model that I showed has actual regions where it's aggregations of different counties, but the demo one will just be 3 sample regions, but you'd still be able to look at the impact of kind of scenarios like I went over. So yeah, you can find that on our website. If you go to I think it's just under, if you click models and then demo models, you'll be able to get a link to download it.
You can get the demo for E3 Plus as well as our other models as well if you're interested in those. Another question that we received is, can you explain the capabilities of E3 Plus that your flagship model PI Plus do not have?
Yeah. So E3 Plus. So one of the benefits that PI Plus doesn't have is are those the results, like the carbon dioxide emissions, energy consumption, and social costs of carbon. So those are the benefits in terms of the results side. We also, a couple of things I didn't go over that are also benefits that E3 Plus has are their specific detailed power plant construction profiles. So showing if you wanted to do a custom look at the impact of a certain power plant construction, you could customize it in terms of if it's natural gas, if it's coal, nuclear, solar. So and then you can also further customize that. So that's the benefit on the input side. So you can do that construction and then an operations and maintenance too for those. So those are the major benefits over PI Plus.
Excellent, thank you. Next, we have another question. So, can you break down employment changes by demographics like race and gender?
So we have another module that our socioeconomics indicator module. It would be doesn't come with the standard base model, but that one combines some of the economic and demographic concepts. So you can view things like employment by race, gender, educational attainment, compensation by income quintile, employment by income quintile, labor force participation by race and gender. So that's another module that's available if you're interested in those additional concepts. So we can be happy to provide a demo of that if you're interested as well.
Excellent. Thank you. It looks like there's no other questions at this time unless one comes in quickly. But again, I'll just repeat it, that in about an hour, you will receive a copy of the video recording of this webinar, as well as the slides from the webinar that you can use for your reference. If you have any questions about this presentation that you don't want to ask now, please feel free to reach out to info@remi.com, and we definitely look through that very constantly. We'll be able to connect you with somebody to answer your question. Looks like we got another though. So Jeff, I got another one for you. Mm-hmm. Could you direct us to the data source of emission factors and the social cost of carbon?
Yeah, we have some documentation on. I don't know that offhand, but we have documentation available. So that's if you were to download our demo E3 Plus model from our website, the documentation's included within that, and I can show you how to access that. Let's share my screen again. Let's see this one. Okay, so if you download the demo model, and then you go over to the home screen, click Help, and then the all documentation. There's one specifically for E3 Plus. So the let's see, it might be in the user's guide. So there's the user's guide, and there's also another piece of documentation that looks specifically at E3 Plus and the equations within E3 Plus. So those two pieces of documentation can all be found within this help, the help section, and then documentation. So, but if you have any questions or have trouble finding that, feel free to reach out, and we can help out with that.
Excellent, thank you. Again, if anybody has any additional questions about this presentation or about REMI in general, please feel free to reach out to info@remi.com. It's monitored very regularly, and we'll be able to connect you with Jeff or somebody else who will be able to answer your questions. But thank you, Jeff, for the great presentation, and thank you for all who attended, and we hope you have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.